Hello, I'm Christian, and welcome to the Jenoir Leadership Podcast, a show where we talk about effective collaboration, influence, and leadership in an increasingly complex world. My interview partner is Dr. Dirk Schlimm. Dirk is an international leadership expert and the author of Influencing Powerful People. The purpose of this podcast is to share ideas and stimulate discussion, and it does not constitute professional advice of any kind. If such advice is needed, the services of a competent professional should be sought. The speakers, host, and Jenoir International Incorporated are not to be held responsible for any use, misuse, or reuse of the content. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the Jenoir Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host Christian, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. On today's episode, Dirk and I are very pleased to be beginning another two-part interview series. Our special guest this time is Nik Nanos. Nik is a Canadian authority and world-leading expert on political, business, and social trends. He is the founder of Nanos Research, a leading polling and strategic insights firm. In addition to being a highly sought-after commentator in Canada, his influence extends to the international stage, where he is a member of the prestigious Trilateral Commission and the Atlantic Brücke, organizations dedicated to fostering dialogue and cooperation among global leaders. With his unparalleled expertise, Nik has become a trusted advisor to business and government leaders navigating the complexities of today's complex, uncertain, and interconnected world. Again, we're very excited to have Nik on, who took time for us in his very busy schedule. You will not want to miss this episode or the next one where we continue the conversation. So I encourage you sit back and enjoy this two-part interview series. Dirk, Nik, and I will be diving into the topics of business and political interests colliding, how that relates to leadership in this uncertain world, data-driven leadership, and so much more. You're going to want to catch both parts, but let's dive in now and get to know a bit about Nik. Nik, thank you for joining us today.
It's good to join, Christian, you and Dirk.
Yes, and we are so glad that you've made the time, especially right now when we're recording. We know that it is a busy time for you, Nik, so we'll dive right in. For our audience who is listening, just very briefly, we like to follow at the Jenoir Leadership Podcast a QA2 model of asking our interview questions. So I'll ask a question, Nik, you'll answer it, and then occasionally Dirk will jump in with the two, which are his 2 cents. So Nik, why don't we get started here? Our first question is just, we always like to give our audience a bit of personal background just to learn a bit more about you. So perhaps you could just share a bit about your journey, what led you to the field of political research and public opinion, and how has your background shaped your insights into leadership and decision-making?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I never planned to be a pollster as a kid. Actually, when I was quite small, I told everybody that I wanted to be an astronaut because obviously I lived in the time when we were, going to the moon. But that dream faded. I was actually planning to be a lawyer. I was at Queen's University doing my undergrad in political studies and history, and I was studying all that kind of stuff and preparing to go to law school. And then I received a call from one of my dad's friends who was decided to be a local candidate seeking public office, and he said, I think Jimmy's son knows how to do this survey stuff. I'm going to give him a call. So he had this proposal. It was really funny. Had this proposal. And, this is back in the 1980s, right? So he had a proposal from a Toronto firm. It was for $10,000. And he said, Nik, is this proposal any good? Can you give me advice? What should I deal with them? And I half seriously, half jokingly said, what are you doing paying for this company in Toronto? Give me $10,000. I was an undergraduate student at Queen's. And he goes like, are you serious? I go, yeah, I think I could do it. So anyways, did the survey. And after the survey, he said, like, what are you doing? I said, well, I've just written the LSAT. I'm getting ready to go to law school. He said, I think you might be good at this. And he said, like, how much money do you have? I said, $10,000, coincidentally. And he rounded up himself and 2 other business people to start the company off and to invest in the company. And it all started from there in Kingston. And you can imagine, Christian, My professors were completely mortified to find out that an undergrad student was getting paid. I was getting actually paid by the local media to do surveys on, the mayor's race, provincial politics, customer satisfaction surveys for small businesses. So yeah, and finished with our big break was receiving a call. So in that, Christian, you won't remember, Dirk will remember the Yellow Pages. Dirk, remember the Yellow Pages?
I remember the Yellow Pages.
Well, in Kingston, we were the only market research firm in the Yellow Pages, and I remember we got a call from the local office manager running an office products store, asked us to do an exit survey of customers, what they wanted, why they're in the store, how satisfied they were. And we did the project for the princely sum of $950, an exit survey. Didn't make any money. But he said, my boss wants to talk to you. Talk to his boss. She goes, we have 19 stores. Can you do all 19 stores? And this was a small little company at the time. I don't know if you've heard of it, Staples. So we grew with Staples from 19 stores in Canada to 225 stores. Oh. And Staples, doing work for Staples was a masterclass in how to enter markets, consolidate markets, drive your competitors out of business, and how to connect with customers. So, and then we just took it from there.
Wow, that is quite the journey, Nick. That is a lot. And Dirk and I think we were both laughing at various points. There is so much going on there. Like this entire podcast could be unpacking that journey. Dirk, I noticed you laughing, especially at the lawyer comment. Dirk, any thoughts on that journey there?
Yeah, just quickly, we said we had a lawyer from Madrid earlier this morning. Your second host, this was Alejandra Martinez from Madrid, and I told Alejandra, you can never have too many lawyers on the show. So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, Christian, back
to
you.
There we go. There we go, indeed. So Nick, thank you again for sharing that journey. But we do want to flesh that out a little bit. Here on the podcast, we do have an international audience. So we know here in Canada, many Canadians who are watching, especially TV, probably see you a great many days, if not every day right now, given the climate, but especially with the political environment. But you also do a lot of work in the US and Europe. So maybe you can tell us a bit about your international work. I'm sure our audience would be interested.
Yeah. Actually, for 15 years, I was a research professor at the State University of New York in Buffalo, focusing on Canada-U.S. relations. I'm with the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be in Washington next week. And we do work, apart from the work that we do in Canada, we do a lot of work in the U.S. tracking studies on brands and perceptions, on tourism, hospitality. We do also work for some countries in terms of their reputation in the United States. And we also do work in Germany. I have a German partner, Reinhard Schlinkert, who owns DMAP Infratest, which is does the polling for the ARD, the large public broadcaster. So, the thing is the great thing about work is that I learn something new every day, and that we're polling not just in Canada, we're polling in different countries. So you kind of get to learn the cultural context and kind of the nuance. So I feel like I'm a walking, talking repository of data for thousands of enterprises that have, want to expand in different countries, that are looking at doing communications campaigns and how to engage people or do advertising in different countries, or even just to target. So it's a lot of fun. And I never planned it that way. I became partners with Reinhard because he has a leading edge research technology. And I remember I'm partners with my brother. So we're a family business. Sounds like you guys are a family business too. Yeah. So I remember, there was a sector that we wanted to get into, and I was talking to my brother, and I go, well, we can build this from the bottom up, but I said, my friend Reinhard does this. I said, why don't we talk to him? And the thing is he is also a family owned, like they're a major player in Germany as we are in Canada, but they're also a family owned business. And there was I've been friends with Reinhard for a long time, never thought of him as a business partner. And then this opportunity came, and I kind of told him, I said, Reinhard, we're not interested in kind of, rebuilding what you built. Why don't we just be business partners? And, and the rest is history. But I'm a big believer in people, but also opportunities present themselves, and you have to be open to accepting opportunities that might not necessarily be in your strategic plan or your corporate plan. I think you have to be agile. I still tell my boys, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. New opportunities might present themselves, and if you're open, you have to have that level of agility.
Right. No, Nik, thank you for sharing that. Those are definitely themes that we've come across on the show before. And I think your story and what you described there are great illustrations of opportunities and family connections, relationships, working with people. So there's so much more we could say about those things, but I think just hearing your story gives great illustrations and learning a lot already. So maybe now we can dive into some of the big questions here that we are thinking about when it comes to leadership. Nik, in your experience analyzing public opinion and political trends, what qualities distinguish leaders who excel during periods of uncertainty and rapid change?
I would put two things based on my experience, and I deal a lot with CEOs and boards: patience and foresight. And you know what? People might see those things as perhaps contradictory, but the reality is that the number of times, Christian, that I would be hired by a company or a CEO that would say, Nik, we're going to war. Something has happened and we're going to war. And I'm hiring you to tell me how to win the war. And then we'd go out and I'd say, okay, right? I'd go out and do the research, and I come back and say, oh, by the way, don't go to war. You are going to escalate a problem because, no one thinks that this is a problem. And by you kind of turning your focus to something, your customers are going to wonder what the heck is going on. So, so that's an example of patience. The other thing, and I find this is a blind spot for a lot of organizations, is, these highly successful organizations have great individuals at the top. They have a superb expert leadership team. They know everything about what's happening today, but they do not have the time to think about the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And, what I usually kind of say to clients is, you know what? My job is to come in and to put on the table the issues that you are going to be dealing with in the next 5, 10, or 15 years. And you need to plan. You need to always take time to pause and reflect on those, because, you're usually really good at dealing with today, but you don't have enough time to think, are we strategically positioned for the future? Are we resilient in terms of our customers? How are we dealing with the changing market environment? What will happen if there are new entrants? How will technology disrupt us? And to get ahead of that. So I put those two things, kind of foresight and patience, because a lot of CEOs, I'm sure, Dirk, you've seen this, a lot of CEOs are like, we've got to do something immediately. And it's kind of like, maybe pause a second. And then the other thing is they're so focused on today, they're not looking towards the long term.
Right. Nik, that makes a lot of sense. And as you're getting at there, that might not be an initial impulse for people during times that are high stress, but clearly they are critical in order to succeed, not only in the moment, but going forward. Dirk, as Nik mentioned, you've probably seen situations like these. Do you have anything that you would want to add here?
I have my 2 cents. That's the format of the podcast, Christian. Of course,
there you go. Of course.
I would say couldn't agree more with Nik. Take time to think. There is a gravitational pull of the immediate concern, and that pulls us into the operational day-to-day. We need to step out, take time to think, and having someone like Nik who helps us do that and brings a lot of information, but then also forces a CEO a little bit to take a time out and deal with that. I think super valuable. The other one, again, Nik, couldn't agree more. There is this impulse. I want to do something. And, especially a little bit right now, you get upset with something, but could be a competitor, whatever it is. But people underestimate the backlash you're creating. If, for example, I think of a lawsuit, you want to sue a competitor, but these guys are not going to just take it. You're going to have something come back that maybe you underestimate. And so having a sober assessment, and as Nik says, having some patience and, let that moment pass and then take a cold, hard look, I think so.
And I think, Dirk, I don't know if you would agree, but I think I'd add to that. I agree with what you said, that many times you need an outsider to help facilitate. And the thing is that you need an outsider who could come in, and then you could throw under the bus if you want to throw them under the bus, or they could leave and they can help provoke those uncomfortable discussions, because sometimes they can't happen. And here's an example. So I provide advice to the Royal Canadian Navy. Well, they have a chain of command. Can I tell you something? When there's a chain of command, subordinates, and when I say subordinates, like other admirals and stuff like that to the commander, are thinking about how they can implement what the commander has said. They're not there to say, oh, with respect, I don't think that's a good idea. So having that outsider help do those discussions is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Absolutely, that is a great point, and I think very practical. So maybe let's move on to the next question here. And I think as Canadians, this one is especially relevant, but I'm sure internationally people will identify with the question as well. But Nik, given the growing overlap between politics and business, how can leaders better understand and adapt to the political forces that impact their industries?
Yeah, I think one of the things, that I tell my clients, so I thought, where I thought you were going? I thought you were going to say the T word, Trump. I thought that's where you're going. How are we going to deal with Donald Trump?
Right.
What I tell my clients, and I wrote a book on Donald Trump, believe it or not, way back, which is sadly prophetic. But I tell clients, when you see politicians that are successful, even though you're not in politics and you're a corporation, you might want to think of why they're successful, because the reality is voters are customers. Mm. So, the thing is for Donald Trump, for example, he's very successful at connecting and simplifying things and kind of emotionally I don't want to use the word trigger, but emotionally engaging people. And I'd always tell, and I have been telling my corporate clients, I said, most corporate clients are evidence-based decision makers. So there's like, oh, here's the value of what we do. Here's how wonderful it is. Let me tell you 20 reasons why. And I was going to say, so what are you going to do for someone that's not going to read the label and is not interested in reading that? What are you going to, and that you need to kind of emotionally connect with customers so that they feel loyal, so that they feel part of your community, that they're proud to be your customers, whether it's a particular piece of technology or a service or whatever. And that, we should learn from politics in terms of how we can better connect with customers. The other thing is, it's very important for CEOs, especially of major enterprises, to believe that it is important for them to participate in the public policy process. Because you know what? Governments set policies. Those policies can only be successful and achieve their objectives if there are stakeholders, and I include unions in that group. I include corporations, advocacy groups. If there are stakeholders that kick the tires, right, do the due diligence, so that public policy can be strengthened. So, the two big pieces of advice for kind of corporations is pay attention to why politicians are successful, because that might give you insight on your own customers. And second of all, don't think that politics is a goat rodeo. Christian, do you know what a goat rodeo is? Where a clown rides a goat. How's that?
Okay.
That's your tip of the day from Nik Nanos.
I'll take it.
So don't think that politics is a goat rodeo and say they're just a bunch of idiots and I don't want to get involved. You have to say it's important to be involved and to contribute to the public policy process, regardless of who's in power.
Nik, that's great and very practical, and I appreciate the goat rodeo. I will make sure to remember that. That is a tip for the day, and I'll work that into a conversation. I'm sure I'm my father's son in that way. But when you mentioned the T word, Nik, I was thinking tariffs, and that's a whole different. That maybe that's Trump's favorite T word right now, but maybe another conversation aside. Dirk, you are nodding along. What do you have to think here?
Just a very quick comment, because what Nik's saying is so important. People think that decision making is a rational process. And it is not, as Nik says, I have a piece of paper, line in the middle, pros and cons. It is very, very often an emotional process, especially and also for intelligent people. So this is here what the academic neurologist at the Yale University has to say. He tells us that intelligent people don't use their intelligence to make decisions, but to rationalize decisions. Right? The emotional decision making comes first, but they're very, very smart. Then they afterwards they can explain it. But it is this appeal, the narrative, right? That these politicians, good politicians, can be so good at. Where I really think that business people can learn from somebody who can connect with people, has a strong narrative, and that can really change perceptions. And then you put the rationality behind it after. So I think a very important point that Nik made.
Dirk, I've got a good story. So I have like one of my regular clients, a major enterprise. They have internally 125 lawyers. So they have their own internal law firm in addition to their external advisors. They're in a regulated industry. And the CEO told me, he goes, Nik, I need you to come talk to my lawyers, right? To kind of help them because they need help. And, so I go in and I start off my discussion by saying, okay, I know you're lawyers, and your perception is if we can craft one more legal argument or have one more piece of advice, then the regulatory body will change its mind, right? And that's all the lawyers would be thinking about is like one little thing to argue or another study or another piece of evidence. And then I said, okay, let me just use an example. Say you are in a social setting and you see someone that you like, and you go up and you'd say, let me tell you 10 reasons why we should be friends or why we should be in a relationship. And you start rhyming off all those reasons and you get to 10 and you don't have any luck. And then you're thinking, maybe if I just have another reason that this person will change their mind. And I'd say, but you don't realize they don't like you. There's something that you've done that they don't like. You could keep presenting, to Dirk's point, you could keep presenting all these wonderful things, but they don't like you. So, accept that. And then you have to be thinking about, you still have to do, I still believe, Dirk, we still have to do evidence-based. That has to be part of the mix. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that emotional sensitivity overlaid, you're just missing a huge opportunity.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, Nik. And maybe that's a good segue, thinking about evidence, but then also what you previously mentioned, voters as customers and the themes that you're sharing with. Bringing it back to the start, you shared your journey about how you got to where you're at now, and we know the important work you do. So maybe just thinking about the power of data and insights, maybe a general question: how can leaders just use data to make better decisions without becoming paralyzed by too much information, where it seems like that might be an issue as well?
I was out in Vancouver at a talk with a bunch of CEOs on artificial intelligence, and I opened my talk by saying, and I said, I have a bias because I'm a data scientist, but I said, CEOs have to think of the data that they have as an asset, like a building, especially in this world of artificial intelligence, because proprietary data will actually be king. Non-proprietary data is a commodity. It's out there. And I told them, I said, in our firm, we believe that our data is worth more than our revenue. And just as context, we do this tracking study with for Bloomberg News. It's a Nanos product that we license to Bloomberg News. And that we've done this tracking study for 20 years. It's 4 questions. It's just 4 survey questions. That was valued at $5 million, just one little data set, just because of how good the data set was. And for CEOs, what I'm telling them is you have to think of the internal data that you have as an asset, and you have to start organizing that asset, especially as artificial intelligence becomes more important. Because if you can harness that asset, you will have a competitive advantage because you will have a good data set for the machine learning algorithms and the artificial agents to work. But then you will also have an asset that if you are ever acquired, you will be able to kind of list to say, oh, by the way, in this world where artificial intelligence is increasingly important, we have proprietary data that no one else has that can help you make better decisions, increase your competitive advantage. And, so I've been telling CEOs, you have to rethink data and IT completely. You have to think of it as an asset. And then, but here's the crazy part. There are still CEOs that are kind of making decisions that are not evidence-based. Kind of, so, there's one end of the spectrum where, yes, intuition counts and stuff like that and experience, but you still need to be grounded in hard facts. So I've got a complete rethink, and I've been telling folks, you're going to, and maybe Christian, when you invite me back in 10 years, I'll be a little grayer. Your dad's already too gray anyway.
Yeah.
But I think on balance sheets, we're going to see, like, intellectual property. It'll be the data that you have that machine learning can use to help you be successful. I think that's going to be an asset, and people will be acquiring other companies for the data that they have.
Yeah, Nick, that is great to hear, and I think fascinating just to think about when it comes to technology and how it impacts so much of what leaders do, what teams are doing. And yes, in 10 years, I think Dirk you're right, already great. But in 10 years,
will you be gray in 10 years? I don't know.
I don't know if I will be gray. We'll see how the political landscape goes. Maybe I'll be pulling out all my hair by then. But we'll see about that. But Dirk, I know your gray hair speaks your wisdom, Dirk. So I'll bring you back in for your two cents here. You love the conversation about tech and data. What are your thoughts here?
I do. I want to put in $2 on this one, but Nick is our guest. I keep it short. It's already, the intangibles are such a massive part of the value of a corporation, especially data. Governments understand that. The Competition Commissioner for the European Union says whoever controls the data flow really controls power. I mean, that a statement like this tells you really what's going on. It is a massive asset. At the same time, and this is where I do put in 2 cents here, of course, if it's personal data, it's an asset, but you need to curate it properly and carefully, right? It's the
100%.
asset that can get you into trouble. And so paying attention to the value of data, and then paying attention to how you handle it. You don't want to be seen as selling it unduly. If it's personal data, you want to do what Nick does and transform data into insight, right? Once it's an insight that's divorced from the original personal data, maybe now you have a real asset, and you want to set up those processes in your company very carefully, very early on. You build that foundation because you're adding more data to it. So you need to have that framework, and then it's a super powerful asset, exactly as Nick is saying, that is going to get more powerful because so much more things can be done with data, or combining different data together to derive yet new insights. I'll keep it to 2 cents. We have so many topics for separate shows. Christian, back to you here.
No, I'll keep us moving because as you're saying, and as I'm getting the sense of the conversation, every one of these questions could be a full discussion. So I'll do the moderator host job and keep us going. I know the audience will be a bit frustrated, but that's my job. All right, and on that theme of doing my job, I'm going to have to put a pause here to this amazing conversation. That's been part 1 of a 2-part series with Nik Nanos. But as that implies, there is a part 2. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, already uploaded part 2. You can catch that right away, right now. Just move over there. Dirk, Nick, and I continue the discussion. We move into topics related to public opinion, political trends, geopolitics, and of course, Nick's advice for aspiring leaders. You don't want to miss it. Part 2. We'll see you over there. But before I let you go, I just want to remind you, if you're enjoying this conversation, leave us a 5-star review. That helps the channel. And of course, if you're already enjoying part 1, feel free to share it with a friend. Get the word out there about this conversation. Part 2 is coming up right now. Let's get over there.